View this multicolored object here as a ribbon. It has width and a certain amount of depth, but it's highly flexible. And the inside edge of that ribbon is hemmed, it's held together. And the outside edge is sometimes frayed, sometimes raveled, sometimes held together. The green line with the dots on it is the arrow of time, and the dots represent, time intervals as the arrow of time progresses. Those dots also occur on the ribbon edge, and those are the time intervals of the project time. In other words, the length of the ribbon, as you can see, is longer than the arrow of time, and that ribbon length is the project time. The elapsed time it shows there would be a bar that goes across the face of the ribbon, or a line that goes across the face of the ribbon, representing activities and individuals acting at the same time, simultaneity across the movement of progress down the ribbon. The top of the ribbon is non-existent. That is what we call the a priori part of design. It's what's built in. It's the everything that you are already instituted with. It's your health, ecology, your faith, your worldview, your universal laws and mindset. There's motivation, there's logic, social influence, and I would like to throw in, because of the discussion we're having today, passion and courage and self-knowledge. Those things are what those three things are what can combat the evil of design. Did I know self be true? Then you can know. And always know that, as Marissa was saying, that the evil of design is always there. Be prepared for it, look for it, seek it out. Later on, there'll be some more information about that. The purple represents the colors represents the different stages of design, and that's enumerated over on the right-hand side. But the beginning stage we call philosophy and theory, because that's setting the basis for the designer. And I'm going to use that term in the plural sense, because it could be an individual, it could be a whole community, whatever the issue requires for engagement. As you begin to come together as that designer, you develop fundamental knowledge and systems thinking. You use those. You immediately run into the paradox issue, because before you even have a client, there's going to be opposition built into the system, and you're going to have to recognize it and learn how to deal with it from the very beginning. So don't fool yourself just because everything are hunky-dory when you sign the contract. That's just the beginning. The other aspects of this continue on. You have to deal with, on the interior edge of the ribbon, you have to deal with rules, regulations, laws, fixed quantities like materials or money or whatever, constraints basically, and they form that boundary all the way down through the process. After you become engaged in the process, you will create a contract with your clients, And from that, you will develop among the whole group a appreciation for the desiderata, which would also mean this, what I call a strange attractor, that thing that you're seeking to design, but has, as we say, does not yet exist, but has presence in the drive of the whole unity of the whole operation, the whole effort. As you move down in the arrow of time, you begin to pass through the engagement phase, which I talked about, where you establish the contract with the client, and you set the time frames and the budget and the legal aspects and so forth. You have you begin open dialogue with the design participants, and you set targets and objectives along the way. Some instances you create a mission statement and that sort of thing. And at the end of that, in the beginning of the preparation, you develop in one form or another a prospectus, which is some kind of documentation or some kind of commitment as to what you're up to. Now here, as soon as you put that into existence, evil of design rears its ugly head and says, oh, you're going to tear up my town, or you're going to do whatever you're going to do, which is going to upset me, and I'll have none of it. And then you'll be faced with the different types of evil that we've been discussing. And that can vary within the organization, within your design group, and it can be, of course, from outside the design group. The frayed edge of the ribbon at that point is very receptive to receiving negative input as well as positive input. So you want to be able to understand that and move accordingly. What we've done sometimes as in the design context is at this stage we appoint different people to do different jobs and so forth, of course. And one of the things is we choose a person or a group of people to be what I call the court jester. And their purpose, their intention is to be critical, but to be fairly critical and bring forth all of the negatives they can think of. In other words, they're the opposition, and they can actually, on very complex designs, they can go out in the community and join in the community and find out exactly what the negatives are that you're going to be faced with and bring them back to the design team. And they're the court jester because the design team cannot hold them responsible and blame them or cut them off because they don't want to hear it. The court jester works at the pleasure of the king and can't be beheaded except by the king. In addition to that, you will move on into the preparation then, and I'm only just touching the surface on this, but I kind of want to focus on the negativity and the dark side of design because that's what we're talking about. In the preparation phase, this is where you set the work and you do all of your reviews and organizational learning. You do your research and meet with the team members, have discussions and dialogue, and you wind up with the prospectus now being a document that's more like a journal. is being recorded by someone in the design group, and or more persons than one, and kept as if it were a diary of the whole project. We learned early on in some of the design work we've done in the past that what happens is you get partway through the design, you've committed a lot of effort and energy and money and so forth to the design, and the client changes for whatever reason. And if you don't have this historical document, this diary, to carry along with you in a very complex and complicated design effort, you're going to be lost. You have to start all over, or may have to start all over anyway, but at least with a prospectus, you're able to justify where you are now and find a compromise perhaps where you will be going forward. Moving into the immersion phase, this is where you engage in the actual comprehension of what the design effort is all about. You're doing your research, your scoping, sweeping in ideas and elements from the outside, and you do a lot of exchange of ideas and information. There's a use of feedback that you're getting from your outreach to the community or to the stakeholders and those people. And you also get ideas that actually are feed forward ideas, which are represented by the rainbow arrow there that goes from the blue to the green, where an idea comes to fore, but it's not ready for it. You're not ready for it. It's not timely in the design process, but you, again, refer to the prospectus and put that idea into the prospectus so you can use it later on or consider it later on as you move on down the process. Then there's, I want to get a note here. When you're in the immersion process, this is when the apprehension of the evil of design comes into play. This is where you really have to grasp what's happening with the evil of design. And I think I can just show this because it's fairly simple. That's a diagram. Can you see that all right?
I'm going to stop sharing so people can see it clearly. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. What that is there's a blue line and there's a, what is the other line? A blue line and a green line. I don't know if you can see the green line, and an orange line.
Yep.
The blue line, consider that as a track of the opposition. And the green line would be the track of the design team and all of their side of the equation. But those two oppositions do intersect at times and create nodes where they intersect, and that's what the orange line is, which then becomes a opportunity to mitigate the design and in essence offset the nature of the negative design. I had one experience where my boss's boss was an engineer and he hated architects, and he made it known that he didn't like architects. And we were working on a design. We'd built the model. He'd come in and looked at it. He'd grunt and groan and move on. And came time for us to present it to the people that were getting it. And I noticed that he and one of the other engineers were in the back of the room, totally engaged in conversation and pointing in my direction and so forth. And I brought the model that we'd made, and I put it on top of a Coke machine at the side of the office, or the place where we were meeting. And we got into the design, and the first thing they did was they said, well, you didn't do it like we wanted it. We wanted you to do this, that, and the other thing. And it was a setup, basically. So I told them, okay, we have to back up now. We have to consult the prospectus and go back where we started and regain that information that you're now feeding to us, which we didn't have before. And I never let them look at the model. They weren't happy, but it worked because we were able to go back and modify the model and bring it into conformance with the things that they had used as opposition. That was intentional evil design, and it can happen in places that you don't expect. So you have to be able to just live with what happens and go with the flow. So after immersion comes divergence. This is where you're now a cohesive group, more or less. You are a cohort, or you are a design group, and you are operating in the dialogue mode. You know what you're talking about, who you're talking to, and you have your own, it gets to the point, if you use the same design team, often you answer each other's questions or finish each other's sentences. It can be that close. But in the divergence phase, you're opening up again and you're sweeping in anything you can find that might be loose and might be important. That's when you do more inquiry and opening out, and you sharpen your skills and your information and your intuition. Intuition follows you all along this line, all along this curve, where you're picking up signals, and you've got knowledge behind you, and you've got experience behind you, and you've got passion behind you, and you've got your intuition that tells you that, those two guys in the back of the room aren't your buddies. So intuition plays a big role all the way down and in the combat with the dark side. Then we move into the convergence phase, where this is where the system becomes totally bounded. It's been an open system until this point, but now you have to use your design judgment and shut the system, close the raveled edge of the ribbon, so that you can focus on the design effort. And out of that comes the emergence of the total conception, the ideation, the creative aha moment, and the partie. All of that happens within the emergence phase. And it becomes, at that point, you of course are been working with the clients and stakeholders all along, but at that point, you present the idea to them and work with them as to their response to it, and then move on into development of the idea. And again, at that point, the edge of the ribbon's frayed again, because you're opening up the system to receiving new and important information. If it's a building, this is your technical, your structural, your heating, your air conditioning, your laws, rules, regulations, all of that sort of thing. If it's a social thing, you're going out to the community and eliciting feedback and information, and selling them basically on the idea. And it's at that point, I'll tell you another story, where we had a building at that stage all set to go at Lake Tahoe. And it was on public land between two housing developments, condominiums. And we had hearings all over the Bay Area and Sacramento and so forth, and in Tahoe, and everything was going fine. And we had one meeting in San Francisco, and the suits showed up. There was a room full of lawyers. And it turned out that the lawyers were representing the people who had the condominiums on either side of the project. And they, after we made our presentation, they said, well, you can dream all you want because we are going to bring a lawsuit against this and it'll never get off the ground. And sure enough, it never got off the ground. But theirs again was a situation where we were totally blindsided by the dark side and the project disappeared. Of course, when you're working with the government, that happens a lot. You get blindsided quite a bit from areas that you can't do anything about. But if you survive the development stage, that's when you can bring out the ultimate particular, your whole composition, and explain the emergent qualities and so forth, that it becomes a reality, whether it's an outcome or a physical object. That is where it is introduced to the public or to the world. And of course, once it's introduced, then you're back in the design mode, because there will be innovation is the introduction stage, but it'll be followed up by questions and critiques, which you then evaluate, modify, and reiterate. And reiteration is an important aspect of this, because you're constantly iterating back and forth among the different stages. Even when you get down into the later stages, you may have to go back up into engagement or preparation and work with something out of that stage. It's a constantly, it's dynamic and it's constantly changing. And the emergence is never what you expect when you start out. It always changes by all those factors along the way. So I guess that's about all I wanted to say.
Wonderful, Robert. That was fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much. I think doing this twice, I think helped, because first time we had all of that, but I think this was very detailed, and this is very valuable, because coming from somebody who has gone through this process so many times and is familiar with issues involved at every stage, this was just very, very useful, sir.
I still use this diagram all the time.
Wonderful, wonderful. Thank you. Thank you, Robert.